Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight, and welcome to the Catholic Information Center, to those who are in this room and to those who are viewing this amazing program, The Art of Dating, by Professor Michael Foley. My name is Angelica Tom. I'm the Senior Director of Operations here at the CIC, and we're just delighted to have Dr. Foley and to see that he's so recovered from his recent injury. And tonight's program is being co-sponsored by our good friends, the DC chapter of the Thomistic Institute. Yes, woo, come on, a little bit of applause, please. Thank you. Anyway, tonight we're going to listen to a fantastic talk, and there will be time for questions towards the end, and then afterwards we'll have a light reception with wine and beer. So it'll be a good time to be had by all. We are in this time of mourning for the church in this Easter season, mourning for Pope Francis. I'd like to just lead us in a quick little prayer for the Holy Father. Our Father, Hail Mary, and glory be. So, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Also, there will be a little bit of time for Q&A after the Q&A and after the talk to buy the many wonderful books written by Professor Foley, and an opportunity for him to sign them as well. However, now is a little opportunity for the Thomistic Institute, the DC chapter, to speak, and I thank Isabel Kazan, excuse me.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Angelica, and a special thanks again to the CIC for hosting us in this beautiful space and for their generosity. My name is Isabel Kazan, and I'm one of the coordinators of the DC Young Professionals chapter of the Thomistic Institute. Whether you are a new or old friend of the Thomistic Institute, the TI is tasked with bringing the wisdom and thought of St. Thomas Aquinas to college campuses around the world. Our chapter is unique in that we are not affiliated with any one university or college campus, but we serve the DC area. So if you would like to learn more about our events upcoming, please see our website for more information. Tonight, I am pleased to welcome our speaker, Dr. Michael Foley. Dr. Foley is a Catholic theologian, a professor of patristics at Baylor University in Waco, Texas, and the author of over 400 articles and 17 books, including The Politically Incorrect Guide to Christianity, Drinking with the Saints, and most recently, Dining with the Saints. Tonight, he is here to speak to us on the art of dating. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Foley.
Thank you so much. It is a real delight to be here. The first time I was here, both in Washington, D.C. and at the Catholic Information Center, was 10 years ago, May 4th, 2015. The launch party to Drinking with the Saints took place on the roof of this building. There was a lovely cocktail reception, and I just thought, wow, what a marvelous venue. And the Catholic Information Center has been a great venue on a couple of other occasions since. So I'm grateful for our hosts, and I'm especially grateful for the Young Professionals, the Thomistic Institute chapter here, for inviting me. Let me give you a little bit of background about this talk. As Ms. Kazan has mentioned, I am a professor at Baylor University. It's a Baptist university. It's the world's oldest and largest Baptist university, but we have a marvelous Newman Center right across the street from campus. And several years ago, our chaplain invited my wife and me to give two separate talks. The art of dating for Catholic gentlemen and the art of dating for Catholic ladies. So as you may be surprised, I was tasked with the gentlemen and Alexandra with the ladies. And we did this separately, like male audience with the guys and female. So we did this for a couple years, and it went well, but then eventually it was decided we should speak sort of jointly to a mixed audience. But I do remember the first time that I spoke only to the gentlemen. I got a call from a lady, and she said, is it all right if my daughter shows up at your talk? And I said, well, I kind of don't want that, because if there are guys who are embarrassed and they want to ask questions, I want them to be free to do so. So I would kind of prefer that it's guys only. But then I said, if I may ask, why do you want your daughter to come to this talk? And she said, well, I figured any man who would show up to that talk is eligible. And I thought, smart mom. That makes a lot of sense. So the title of my talk tonight is The Art of Dating, and I call it an art because, like any other skill, it requires a certain intentionality, a certain commitment to excellence. So it differs from other arts insofar as you don't date for the sake of dating. Like, if you're learning the piano, you practice the piano as much as you can. I don't want you doing that with dating. Just simply asking people out willy-nilly just to hone your skills. So it is an art, but it's not a generic art, or it doesn't fit the generic bill. But hopefully, good dating will result in all the things that good art results in, which is delight, beauty, and something that gives glory to God. Dating is not just something to be endured until you find a mate. There is an intrinsic delight in it which is good. And that's one of the things I hope to convince you of tonight. I mention this because when I was in grad school, we had two classmates and they got married early. And I remember my classmate Kevin saying, I'm so glad that I'm married now, because dating was always so taxing for me. Every time I dated, it was like a piece of me died. This man, I'm glad he got happily married. This man did not have the art of dating. If Kevin ever asked me out on a date, I would have said no. He was one wet blanket. So you don't need to be that in order to be a proper Catholic discerner. So I'd like to start with kind of the obvious. I see that I'm speaking to a group of mixed ages, so I'd like to start with two things that we don't have in common and two things that we do. So I was dating in the mid-90s when I met my wife, Alexandra, and now you are dating, presumably, in this year of our Lord, 2025. So two things we don't have in common that complicates your situation. In my day, when I dated, we were not really living in the age of internet dating, cell phones, and social media. And I have 6 kids, and 3 of them are over the age of 21. And even in their age, to see within 2 years, each thing gets more complicated, right? My oldest had a flip phone until she was 21 because that was still the thing. And now, my 13-year-old is demanding a smartphone, right? So the transition is so fast. And I'm sure you've heard all the things from Jonathan Haidt and others about the deleterious effects of social media on our mental health and our well-being. I'll only mention that one thing, that social media has increased what has been called the panopticon of spectatorship, which is a great line. Panopticon, everyone can see everyone else. of spectatorship. We all look at each other all the time, but what we're looking at is not our real selves, but this projected image of ourselves. That great line from T.S. Eliot, to prepare a face to meet the faces that you meet. That's true of all times and ages, but it seems to be enhanced in this era of social media. We're constantly projecting a fake face. The irony of it, calling it be real, right? When it's not real, right? So there's this constant projection, and then that takes a toll on your soul. The more that you project, the more you forget who you really are. C.S. Lewis ends his great novel or book, Till We Have Faces. How can the gods meet us face to face until we have faces? And that's a question we can think of with respect to God. It's also a question that we can think of with respect to each other. How can we meet the person that we want with the mask dropped unless we know how to drop the mask ourselves? So again, this is something that faces every generation, but I think it's more complicated by social media. And the second thing that separates your generation from mine is the prevalence of pornography in our culture. I will not bring us down this evening, but it really is a big difference. Again, in my day, you had to find a kid on the neighborhood who had a bad dad who had a stack of Playboys in the basement. And that was your access to pornography. And I thank God that that was the full extent of it when I was growing up. But now, of course, it's just a click away on your phone. And the mountain of growing studies on the psychological damage that pornography is causing both men and women today is really staggering. It's a crippling thing that keeps you from real intimacy with real people. I have 3 daughters. 2 of them have dated. Everyone has had a problem with a young man who really wanted to be good, but had a history that scarred him and prevented him from flourishing. And it affects Catholics just as much as it does non-Catholics. So again, I hate to bring us down, but that is a complicating factor that separates us. On the other hand, we do have one thing in common, so I can still talk to you tonight. Despite the differences in our generation, the one thing we do have in common, besides our common humanity, of course, is that we are both living in the wake of the sexual revolution. And that really is a game changer in world and American history. Because the sexual revelation, it was kind of a revelation. The sexual revolution destroyed the playbook. So the one thing that Americans and others had in common was that there was a shared playbook for courtship rituals. And you could throw out the playbook, and maybe that was part of the fun, but you knew there was a playbook to throw out. Right? There was a shared system of norms for asking a person out. There were rules for dating. They were strengthened by family and community. And all that got thrown out in the name of freedom and sexual expression in the late 1960s. And so if you are growing up in the wake of that, you are growing up in a society that doesn't have the same playbook. And this was done in the name of freedom. But my experience with my own generation and my students is that it has had the opposite effect. Instead of feeling liberated, people feel paralyzed. Because there's no longer a clear way to express your romantic interest honorably. There isn't a marriage of honor and eros, and there was before the sexual revolution. And so it's difficult for a young man to approach a woman and say, I'm interested in you, without coming across as a pervert or a stalker. And so this leads to all kinds of weird pathologies, right? Where you have like just a blind hookup culture where you both admit nothing is honorable. Or what I often see at Baylor, which is, like I said, a Christian university, you have a friendship culture. And like, we're friends. And then suddenly they announce they're engaged. I was like, something missing there, a little step or two, how did this happen? We forget how important social rituals are. In creating a framework, they actually allow us to flourish more. So for example, I met several of you before today's talk. What do you do when you meet someone for the first time? You look them in the eye, you exchange names, you shake hands. We know what to do. And then we can get to know each other, right? But what if we didn't have that social ritual and you meet someone for the first time? Do you extend your leg? What do you do, right? These little social rituals are actually very important in establishing modes of communication. So it is good that we have that in dating, and unfortunately, we don't anymore. So that indeed complicates things. But let me try to provide a positive vision despite these various complications. What I see is, for us here tonight, one goal and three options. The one goal is the same no matter what our status on earth. It is to be a better lover in the true sense of the word. Our calling as Christians, Catholics, is to be a better lover in the true sense of that word. And concretely, that means, of course, to be a better lover of God and a better lover of thy neighbor. So the two greatest commandments, love the Lord thy God with your whole heart, etc. One of the paradoxes of a successful Christian marriage is that the spouses love God more than each other. I know that sounds terribly unromantic. But the only other alternative is that you love your spouse more than God. And if you love your spouse more than God, you are making your spouse a god. And no one can live up to that. No one can live up to that expectation. They will be crushed, or you will be disappointed. No one can become a god in your life without something bad happening, right? So paradoxically, if you love God more than your spouse, you become a better lover to your spouse. You take that pressure off them, and then you can just love them as they truly are. So number one is you love God first. And ironically or paradoxically, it will make you a better spouse to your spouse. The second thing, of course, is to love thy neighbor as thyself. And St. Augustine has a wonderful commentary on this. He notes that the love of God is unconditional. The love of neighbor is supposed to spring from or somehow be connected to the love of self. Why? Well, one thing that Augustine says is the love of self does come naturally, but we often need to be taught how to love ourselves properly. It does and it doesn't come naturally. Therapy, for example, is maybe teaching you to love yourself in the right way. And I think spiritual direction has the same goal, right? There's a way in which we're too hard on ourselves, and then there's a way in which we're not hard enough on ourselves, right? We haven't quite learned how to love ourselves properly. And so we should keep that in mind before we think about how to love our neighbor. We should ask ourselves, are we loving ourselves properly? There was a fascinating book that came out a number of years ago by a guy named James Lucas. You know how when you're single, one often asks the question, is he the one? Is she the one? Perfectly natural question. But the title of Lucas's book is, Am I the One? And the whole purpose of the book is to put the focus back on you. If you really want a spouse with these qualities, what are you doing to attract those qualities, right? You can't just want gold and remain lead, right? So if you really want a person with this character, you've got to cultivate that character. So the question is not, is she the one, is he the one, am I the one, right? So that's what I mean by that proper self-love. Cultivate your excellence and you will attract the right person, right? But try to phone it in or try to be a phony and get the right person, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. Okay, so you love God, you love yourself properly, and now it comes to your neighbor. Well, there are 3 options for loving your neighbor, and we'll focus on loving your neighbor who happens to be of the opposite sex. You can love your neighbor as a friend. You can love your neighbor while dating, and then you can love your neighbor in courtship and then eventually marriage. So let me describe those 3 things. I'm sure you've all heard or seen the movie When Harry Met Sally, which has the overriding question, can men and women be friends? The question is left unresolved because, of course, not to give away the ending, but Harry marries Sally. So it's friends became lovers. I am of the opinion that men and women can be friends, but one must also acknowledge the fact that it will always be more complicated because there will always be a soupçon of erotic tension between men and women, whether different ages, whether they're married or not. There is just something about men and women that creates a certain tension in the air. And I personally do not bemoan this. I have a French mentality, vive la différence. But it is something to be aware of. It does complicate friendships. And I'm sure, I imagine every one of us who went to college probably has an experience of a friendship that suddenly seemed to veer more towards a friendship and one person regretted it and the other person doesn't. Like, I imagine this is a common story. So friendship can happen between persons of the opposite sex, but one does need to be cautious. The second option is what I call, and what used to be called, dating. And this gets a little tricky because what I'm thinking about in particular is the sort of 1950s model of dating. So in the 1950s model, you dated and then you went steady. We're not probably going to have much luck bringing that phrase back. And then you got married or engaged or whatever. But dating was a very interesting thing. It doesn't mean what it means today. When you dated in the 1950s, it was a non-monogamous and non-active interaction. So you as a young lady could accept a date from Bob on Monday, Tom on Tuesday, Harry on Thursday. You'd go out, you'd have a soda together or whatever. Maybe there'd be a hug or a kiss on the cheek at the end of the night. but you are by no means an unchaste woman by having 3 dates in a single week. There were no expectations about that. And then when you paired off, so everyone is discerning each other. And then when you find yourself attracted to one person more than the other, that's when you went steady and went into a more monogamous, exclusive relationship. I actually think that is a healthy model, as long as it remains chaste. The problem of bringing it back is it seems that everyone has to be on board in order to make it happen, right? There has to be a widespread understanding of this framework. Otherwise, it just seems really weird. Why do you keep asking all these girls out? What kind of Lothario are you? So you could see how it's a good idea, but it would require a societal change, which I don't think is going to happen anytime soon. And then, of course, the model that we're most familiar with is courtship, which is this sort of pairing off and discerning for marriage. How do we translate this into our contemporary situation? The answer is with caution. It's interesting. My own courtship with my wife, Alexandra, had a little bit of both elements. She actually had a kind of 1950s dating model in mind because that's what her mother had done with great success. She married a wonderful man. And so my wife had that kind of model. But then I saw her dating other guys. She was dating them chastely, but I saw them and I was like, she's not serious for marriage. And I remember, so the first time I did ask her out, the question I asked her, so I was in grad school and she was not. She graduated from college, but she was now a manager of a floral shop in Boston. And I don't know about you, but if you've been in grad school long enough, you forget how weird you are and how constrained your vocabulary is. Like you're just kind of used to talking a certain way to other people. So I said to Alexandra on our first date, "What do you think of teleological dating?" Thinking this was an average word that, of course, everybody understood. And she's like, "What the heck?" So she kind of evaded she didn't know the meaning of the word, but she wouldn't admit it. So she kind of gave an evasive answer. And I was like, uh-oh, maybe she's not interested in teleological dating. So she asked one of her friends at Boston, who was an Opus Dei and had a good education. And, "Oh, no, Alexandra, that's a good thing. He's asking if you're serious. That are you dating in order to get married?" And that's exactly what I was asking, but I was a grad school idiot, so I didn't know how to bring the hay down to the sheep, right? So it is a bit tricky navigating these waters today. But the good news is it can be done. It absolutely can be done. So I told you that my wife and I used to give sort of 2 separate talks. We are combining them this evening. So I'm going to give a couple of bits of advice first to the men in the audience, and then 3 bits of advice to the women, thanks to my wife, Alexandra. But you can all listen to each other's bits of advice. That's okay. You don't have to close your ears. And with the men, I offer the following advice. And in full disclosure, I have been guilty in some way of all of these. So I'm not preaching to you. I am also guilty as charged. But especially I've noticed, so point number 1 for men, don't be a coward and don't hide behind friendship. It seems to me a very common thing that I see among my students is they're interested in somebody, but they won't show it. So they say, "Oh, let's just be friends. Let's be friends." If it really reaches a point where you are attracted to someone and you think, this could be the one, then be clear about your intentions and ask them on a date. It is the romantic thing to do, and it is the honorable thing to do, right? So there's just something kind of sneaky about sidling into a relationship just under the cloak of platonic friendship. And like I said, I've been guilty of this, so I'm not casting aspersions. The second bit of advice I would give to men is date up. Never use the excuse, she's out of my league. Be like the United States Air Force, aim high. That's how I got Alexandra. A lot of men, when they realize, oh, she's out of my league, think, oh, well, I can't ask her out. But when I realized Alexandra was out of my league, I was like, yeah, let's go for it. Miss Kazan knows what I'm talking about. And then the third thing I would say to men is, in your mentality, be a knight in shining armor. Uphold the ancient standards of the gentleman. Fall in love with chivalry before you fall in love with someone else. Chivalry is a great word. Chevalier, the mounted horseman, the knight. And the medieval knight was a true man, but he also upheld Christian standards. So I mention this mentality of the knight as a sort of antidote to a very common question that people have when they are dating and courting. And the question is, how far can I go? It is a very understandable question. You have to go to confession next week. You need to know, have I broken any standards? But unfortunately, it's the wrong question. To ask how far can I go is like asking, how can I do the bare minimum to get into heaven by the skin of my teeth? And you're thinking, what's wrong with that question? Well, you got something wrong. You're Jesuit casuist, for one thing. But no, you're supposed to love Jesus. How do I love Jesus more, right? How do I love God more? Not how do I get into heaven by the skin of my teeth, right? That's the wrong question. And how far can I go is also the wrong question. The knight asks, how may I uphold my dignity and the dignity of my date? How do I uphold my dignity and the dignity of my date? How do I protect and foster the good, the beautiful, and the sacred while I am discerning this relationship, right? That's the question men need to be asking, and women as well, but I think men especially need to hear that. Guard your dignity and guard her sacred dignity as you discern, right? As for women, I would like you to picture a beautiful wife and mother, and not weird middle-aged guy standing in front of you as he gives you women the following advice. Sex is good. See, this is why I said, don't picture me. This is Alexandra speaking. Sex is good. Sex is the way God chose to create human life. The devil wants you to either use it the wrong way or to think that it's bad. He is very clever. The differences between the sexes are good. Let you be a woman, and let him be a man. Just be careful of occasions of sin. And she adds that a woman does need to be particularly cautious about alcohol, because women in general can get intoxicated more easily. And then in a bar situation, you need to be very careful. The advice you may have heard already is if you're a woman especially, you never leave a drink unattended and then go to the restroom, because there are unfortunately very evil men out there with things like roofies that can poison your drink. All right, so that was point number one. Point number two is let him ask you out. So this is an interesting question, and this is one of those areas where there actually is a difference between morality and honor. We think of the two as sort of coeval, but there actually can be some interesting differences. There is absolutely nothing immoral in a woman asking a man out for a date. If you ladies ask a man out for a date, you do not need to go to confession and say, "Forgive me, Father, I asked out Bob." You don't need to do that. Nothing wrong with it whatsoever. But there are psychological reasons why it might be prudent for you to let him ask you out. So you may have heard the story about being a chicken farmer. And when a baby chick is hatching out of its egg, what happens is that struggle to hatch out of the egg strengthens the chick. It's got this tiny little protrusion from its beak, specially designed to poke through, and the repeated action builds its muscles so that when it finally does break through, it has muscular development and can survive. Every now and then, if you're a chicken farmer, you will see a chick struggling mightily to get outside, and it can't. And so the temptation is to peel back the layers and help the chick get out. But in the majority of cases, when you do that, the chick perishes. So gentlemen, I hate to give away our secret. We are that baby chick. And ladies, what you have to do is let us peck out of our shells. Let us screw up the courage, pecking repeatedly to ask you out. If you pull back the shell, you might get a date out of us, but it'll render us weaklings. So in the interest of male psychological development, it is better to let the male figure this out and ask you out himself. Screw up that courage. And then the last thing my wife has to say, which I would echo for the men as well, is dating is discernment. So you don't use people, but neither do you think of a breakup as a failure. This is a very easy temptation to fall into. You date for a couple times, it doesn't work out, and you ask, well, what happened? Well, when you date and you decide that this is not my life's mate, you're not saying they're a bad person. You're not casting judgment on their character. You're discerning compatibility, right? There are, thanks be to God, thousands of wonderful, solid, virtuous Catholics in the world, but not all of them would make a good mate for you, right? It takes someone that you are in love with and someone who can put up with you. And that's going to narrow the Venn diagram, right? And that's okay. Every failed date is a success, in the same way that in science, every failed experiment is a success. It eliminates what doesn't work and narrows the pathway for what does work. So don't be filled with guilt and self-recrimination when a dating relationship does not work out. It's okay, it's part of the process. Okay, 3 concluding remarks. The first is, and I think this is the one I want to keep it to keep as prominent, there is good news. There is a way to combine honor, faith, and romance. Romance is good. Romantic attraction is good, and it can be done honorably, even in this scorched earth of the post-sexual revolution. It can be done honorably. Point number 2, pray for discernment. It is good to pray, for example, before proposing a date or accepting it. Keep God in your mind as you date. That doesn't mean you need to begin and end every date with a prayer or something like that. But it does mean that you're not making the decision by yourself. You're making it with the help of divine grace. And then finally, I know we've talked about a lot of serious things tonight, but the third and final advice is keep it light and have fun. Dating should be enjoyable. Not like my wet blanket friend Kevin was saying. Dating should be enjoyable. And I personally am so grateful that I met the love of my life. But both Alexander and I like to joke, we were both such good daters. It's a shame we were both taken off the market. So yes, enjoy this chapter of your life. Thank you and good night.
Excellent. And we will never listen to Wet Blanket Kevin, so thank you so much. Now it's time for the Q&A. Gerard is out there with a microphone as well. So please just raise your hands and one of us will come to you so that the folks on the live stream can hear you.
Thank you, Professor.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask a follow-up question on compatibility, because I think on the one hand, if someone was to ask me, what are you looking for? You could give them, like a physical description, right?
Yeah.
Then there's also like the type of person you're looking for. That type of person and understanding compatibility, some of it is sameness, some of it is like balancing, like, maybe a little opposite of what I am to keep things interesting.
Yeah.
And temperament. So maybe go deeper on that.
Yeah. Are you asking, so what is the nature of compatibility, or?
Yeah, maybe like how should we understand it, similar to how you've given definitions for previous terms?
Yeah. Honestly, I wish I knew. I mean, it's that je ne sais quoi, right? That feeling that, oh, this person really understands me, and I understand them, and I want to know more about them. I really don't know what the green lights are, but I do know what the red lights are. I remember one time we had a couple that they were engaged, two students at Baylor University, and they're kind of hitting a rough patch. And I remember the man saying to the woman, and the woman was a catch, and he was above her, she was above his league. And I remember him saying, sometimes when I'm with her, I get bored of her. And I thought, you're out. And so my wife and I, we don't do this very often, but we both said, cut bait. And they did, and they both found a better match. But even if you're at the stage that you're dating, you're bored with someone else's company and not endlessly fascinated by them, that's a red flag. So there are certain things like that. The other thing I would say to guard against is it's especially for women, it's one thing to think of a guy as a work in progress. Like, oh, he's pretty good, but he just needs a little this and that. That's fine on a minor level. It's not fine on a major level. So for example, when I was dating Alexandra, in the mid-90s, she really liked me. She was in love with me, but I wore a Levi jacket. And she thought that was absolutely ridiculous. Now they're selling for thousands of dollars on eBay. And I was ahead of my time. Anyway, but she never thought, okay, well, he's got a drinking problem, but I can help him with that, right? With major problems, do not fall into a savior complex, right? If you see minor problems with them, they can either be cured, or you must accept the fact that you must live with them for the rest of your life. But if you think that there's a major problem and you can cure it, you're probably being delusional, and you should back off. So those would be a couple of ways in which to discern out of compatibility.
Hello. Yes. So my question is, I guess, as a woman, I guess what is your advice for women if they don't get asked out, or in the situation if they are interested in a guy but they don't know what to do in that situation? Or I guess Yeah, because I guess if the guy's supposed to ask a woman out, but then the woman never gets asked out, like is she just stuck forever? Like what?
Oh, not at all, not at all. So have you heard the expression "drop the kerchief"?
Yes, and I don't know what it means. Well, I know what it means, but I don't know what that means.
It means to draw attention to your eligibility in a way without demeaning your dignity as a woman. I'll put it to you another way. Flirt.
Okay, so how does one do that?
All right. I will give you a crash course in flirting right now, young lady. Flirting is simply a warm way of communicating your interest in a person. It's not sordid. It's not in any way untoward. It could be something as simple as if you're talking with a man you're interested in, you keep eye contact with him just one beat longer. And you ask him questions about himself. He loves that.
Okay. How do you do
How's
that
that?
without being creepy? Because what if you make too much eye contact and then you realize you're staring at him and it looks creepy?
Okay, so you're absolutely right. 1.5 beats is way too long. You just practice. You just practice until you get the hang of it.
Okay.
Yeah,
I've
I'm
left her
concerned
unhappy.
too, so.
Yeah.
Oh my. Okay. We have a question back here.
Yeah, so there's a lot of reasons to be demoralized dating in the current culture. Can you speak more to reasons to be optimistic, just to get the vibe up a little bit in this room? All right.
Well, one great reason to be optimistic is that you're all in Washington, D.C. Talk about like 1,001 awesome date venues. I mean, dating in Waco is depressing. I'm so glad I got there as a married man, But yeah, this is exciting. This is an exciting place to be. And if you want to start just kind of safe and slow, you can do the afternoon coffee date rather than the big evening dinner date. And it seems to me there are really a lot of great places here for a morning or afternoon coffee or bagel or whatever. So enjoy the beauty of the city as you enjoy the beauty of discerning. That would be my main takeaway. Also, I would say, so I assume I'm speaking to a largely Catholic audience. It seems that Catholic youth are so much better than when I was growing up. We really did not have the same level of piety and devotion that I see among your generation. I was mentioning at lunch today, like there was no such thing as adoration when I was growing up. It was as rare as hen's teeth. And confessions were rare. Now the lines are long. And youth groups that are orthodox and do reading of serious texts together. These are all signs of great encouragement. So in some respects, you actually have a better pool than my generation did. So take advantage of it. Enjoy it. I think there are a couple up here.
My question is, what do you think are some of the qualities or traits we should be looking for in a spouse? And I ask that because I think in kind of the modern age, we want our spouse to be the entire package, like mother, lover, friend, fellow hobbyist. And I think like we want that person to be everything to us, where like other periods of time may have just been looking for someone who would be a good mother. So I don't want people to not be like discerning and kind of picky in who their spouse is. But I think sometimes we're trying to be picky across too many factors. And I'm curious your thoughts on what are the things we should really be looking for?
Great question. Unfortunately, I don't have a one-size-fits-all answer. One interesting question that sometimes comes up in discussions such as this is, does your spouse need to be your best friend? And the answer is not necessarily, but it's difficult for me to answer that because my spouse happens to be my best friend. And she feels the same way about me. But I do know of successful marriages where they have a solid, intimate marriage. But yeah, the husband has a male best friend. It'd be kind of weird if he had a female best friend. But he's got his male best friend. She's got her female best friend. And so it varies, right? I guess, again, it goes back to compatibility. Don't have unrealistic standards about someone else. But by the same token, make sure that you have the solid bones for a solid relationship. There is I'll tell you a quick joke. There are two bachelors, old men, who are sitting at a cafe having coffee. And Bob says to Tom, "Tom, how come you never got married?" And he said, "I was looking for the perfect woman, and I never found her." And Tom says, "Bob, how come you never got married?" And he said, "And I was looking for the perfect woman, and I found her." And Tom said, "Well, Bob, why didn't you get married?" And he said, "Because she was looking for the perfect man." Bob wasn't perfect.
Oh, thank you very much for your talk. One question has to do with dealing with rejection. And let's say I go to a church and I want to ask a girl out. She rejects me, so now I have to go to a different parish or something. So what's the best practice here in a healthy way?
Yeah. How many parishes are there in Washington, D.C.? Yes, well, hopefully you didn't ask her out in such a way that it would necessitate you're never showing your face in town again. So if you asked her in an honorable way and she said no, then absolutely show up to the same parish. And it's okay. It will be socially awkward the first couple of times that you see her again, but this too shall pass. And that is one of the advantages of making sure that your romance is combined with honor. Because if you made a romantic gesture in a dishonorable way, then there's a whole shame thing that you do need to deal with, right? But if you really do ask someone in an honorable way, and then she turns you down, and that's her right, well, then you still can show your face in town again. Yeah. And then get over it. Rejection is part of the game. And part of growing up as a man is to learn risk management, right? Seriously, that, men need to learn how to confront risk. And every time you ask a young lady out, you are putting yourself on the line. You're taking a risk. And when she says no, congratulate yourself for taking that risk. You manned up. Yeah. This is very gender essentialist advice tonight. I apologize.
Oops, sorry. Hey, is this good? Okay. Yeah. I'm a visual learner, so I was wondering if you could recommend any old movies or television shows that have great examples of chivalry or dating, like you're talking about, because I think a lot of the content right now it defies what you're talking about, and we're products of things that we watch and see. So I was wondering if you have any good recommendations, and also, we've been hearing a lot from the guys, so I want to hear from more of the girls. I hope you guys raise your hands. That's it.
Yes, you came to the right place for movie suggestions. I'll mention 3 off the top of my head. The first romantic comedy is also the best. It Happened One Night, 1934, Clark Gable and Claudette Colbert. Just a delightful movie about chastity and honor and learning to fall in love with each other. Just a marvelous movie. The second is The Quiet Man, starring John Wayne and Maureen O'Hara, 1953. It's a fascinating exploration of the tension between honor and eros. And in this case, it's 2 conflicting honor codes, that of the native Irish and then John Wayne, who's an Irish American, who has his own understanding of honor, but it's different from the Irish. And so there's this conflict. But it is a marvelous movie because it's 1953 when things were still all G-rated. And there was an article, I think in Crisis magazine came out years ago, that called The Quiet Man, Sex Ed Without the Word Sex Ever Being Mentioned. And it's so true. It really is about sex, but it's done so gently. I grew up with this movie because it would be played every St. Patrick's Day on TV, and I'm from an Irish American family. And it's interesting, and this has happened to my kids as well. You grow up watching this, and then one year, sometime in adolescence, something clicks when you watch, and you're like, oh! So this happened to my daughter, Mary, when she was 16. She grew up watching it, and she said, wait a minute, this is all about sex. She was just shocked, but that's the beauty of it. It's a very gentle teacher into issues concerning sexuality. The last one may seem a little bit odd, but I would actually recommend Groundhog Day with Bill Murray and Annie McDowell, because he has to learn how to become a virtuous man before he can win the hand of Rita. And I actually have an article on this, which you can look up online about Groundhog Day, but I contend that the names are significant. Rita, who's Annie McDowell, is short for Margarita. She's the pearl of great price. And the whole tension of the movie is, how does one acquire the pearl of great price? And the answer is virtue. Yeah. Great date movie, by the way. Huh? Wink, wink.
You talked a lot. You said gender essentialist. So I just want to cut to a point. Our culture kind of does still very much, feminism is still very strong. And I think that's something that we in the Catholic Church are afraid to approach. Although I would say a lot of young men who aren't Catholic, unfortunately, may, as in they view chivalry as a part of, as opposed to, or as as not something powerful enough to overcome kind of our cultural obsession with feminism.
Yes. On the other hand, I tend to be optimistic about these things. It seems to me that chivalry, in a sense, has an opportunity to show its excellence in a way that it never has before. What I mean is this, that for a long time, feminism portrayed all masculinity as toxic masculinity. And so men were afraid to be men. But now we seem to be living in an age where the pendulum has swung in the opposite direction, and you get these deplorables like the manosphere and Andrew Tate, who seem to exult in exploiting and demeaning women. So now you've got these 2 extremes. And I think chivalry is the one that, in a sense, captures the happy medium. Chivalry is the model where men can be men, but with showing absolute respect for women.
Excellent. This is one of the most pithy Q&As we've ever had here at the CIC.
So my question is actually kind of related to that one. This is a good follow-on. Okay. Yes. Good. Maybe it was my cell phone.
It's nothing personal, I'm sure.
So I know a lot of people, many of them my immediate relatives, who have buyer's remorse on the sexual revolution and they would like to return it, and I agree with them. But they also have buyer's remorse on women's professional empowerment. And they would like women to stop having careers and return to the home. And I think they see these things as inextricably linked together. I'm curious for your thoughts on kind of different aspects of how women's roles have changed in society and how that fits with dating, in your view.
Ooh, I wish I had a good answer to that, but women's professional involvement. So I hate to keep using the same phrase over and over again, but I have no cookie cutter model, right? And I've seen many models among my peers work, including the husband staying at home and the wife working. Although in those cases, there was an extra strain on the marriage. I must be honest. Really, it depends on the profession. Right? There are some professions for both men and women that are more compatible with family life than others. So for a woman to have a job with extremely flexible hours and then high demand, where she can take time off if she needs to for her family, would obviously be more compatible with a family life than one that didn't. Yeah, we live, I do believe the model is for the husband to be the provider and the woman to be the main caretaker of the children. I am traditional in that respect. But I also grant that prudence, we are given the virtue of prudence, and that we do need to exercise it depending on a wide array of circumstances. So sorry, I can't be more specific than that. Does that make sense? I believe in the ideal, but I also don't believe in a sort of doctrinaire approach that the woman has to stay at home and not work, right? I agree that it's better that she not, but I don't like too doctrinaire an approach to that. Yeah.
She's shaking her head, yes.
All right.
Okay, we have time for one last question.
Yeah, hi. So there's a young lady who I must confess, her name escapes me. She's a Christendom grad and recently wrote a book. She gave a talk about a couple of years ago in Crystal City. To summarize her life story and her way into marriage, as she tells it, is she decided that she would say yes to more first dates. And that basically if the guy, so long as the guy was, presentable and, not crummy or not creepy or anything like that.
Yeah.
Even if she wasn't attracted to him, she would say yes. Huh. And I don't know if it was that she got more at bats or what, but she found her husband that way. And so she
got to eat.
Yeah, she goes around and gives talks and like encourages women to say yes to more first dates. Now the skeptic might argue that, well, this is just survivor's bias. Like, she got married and therefore this process worked for her. Others might argue that, well, it's in the nature of men tend to know more quickly and women take more time to warm up. And so this approach might be more helpful for their own nature. So I guess what I'm wondering if you have thoughts on that, and if you think women should say yes to more first dates.
I think, again, as a general principle, that's not a bad idea, provided that they're not creepy like you said, and that maybe men should consider asking more women out on first dates. So I think that would be healthy, as long as, again, there aren't too many high expectations going in. It's that 1950s model that would be optimal, right? Where I'm asking you out, but I'm not saying I've fallen in love with you. We're just going out for coffee. If somehow that were understood among both parties, I think that would be healthier. But I don't know which sex falls in love more quickly than the other. So I can at least say, in my case, My wife, Alexandra, knew that I was the one 15 minutes after we first met. And it took me 9 months to ask her out on our first date. One of us was a little slow on the uptake. Yeah.
Well, thankfully, she waited 9 months, and it's happily ever after, right?
Exactly.
God willing. So
right.
anyway, thank you, Dr. Foley. We appreciate you being here today for this remarkable talk. And please, everyone, please join us now for either you could buy one of his amazing books from Kevin, who's at the register, and also help yourself to a drink. We have a bartender to the right once you exit the chapel, and there's like little snacky things around. But thank you, Dr. Foley. Thank you.